There we go. Hey, everybody. We'll give everybody a couple seconds here to jump on. Don't want to wait too long. We got a lot going on for you today. Hope everybody's having a fabulous week. I know people in Colorado got some dicey weather, so hope you're staying warm. All right.
That's why
All
I'm
right.
glad I'm in Northern California.
Right. I'm in Atlanta. It's 75 today. So I'm gonna roll with my warmth today because I know it's not gonna last very long. All right, everybody. So, oh my goodness, welcome to the February webinar. This is the 2023 Harmony webinar series. My name is Christy Weeks and I am your brand and digital media manager. Today we are lucky enough to have Dr. Michael Barnes with us, and he's going to be presenting on families, trauma, and addiction. Dr. Barnes is with the Foundry Treatment Center and Michael Barnes Family Institute. So just a quick rundown on what and who Harmony is. We are nestled up on a 43-acre campus in the Rocky Mountains, just outside of Estes Park. We are a residential rehab. We do have a full medical detox, an IOP program, and a very, very strong alumni program going on. And we do offer comprehensive treatment for adults and their family members. So here's a tick list of all those details. We do believe that long-term recovery from alcohol and other substances is possible. We have been in business since 1969, so we're rolling on 54 years. And our staff at all levels of the organization work together to create that community of recovery support. So we are a 70-bed residential treatment program, as I said before, full medical detox, IOP, alumni program, and a family program. So if you have any questions or you're interested in any other information, please feel free to jump on the website. It's www.harmonyfoundationinc.com, or you can call our admission staff. They will be happy to answer any of your questions. Couple of housekeeping items to go over. This month, we are a 1-hour webinar. For those of you who are with us last month, we did have a 2-hour special webinar this month. We are 1 hour. It is recorded, and we will have this accessible for you on the website probably by the end of day Friday. Please be sure to complete the online evaluation. If you don't see it at the end of the presentation, I will include a link to it in your email with your certificates. Now, in order to get your certificate, you need to be engaged in this webinar for at least 45 minutes. I do track the time, and with that being said, I will have certificates sent out by the end of day on Friday. And I believe that's February 24th. If you don't see it by end of day and Monday rolls around and I'm not there, check your junk email because that's where a lot of my stuff goes. Check there. If you don't have it, feel free to email me. I will get it out to you just as quick as I can. All right. So as I said before, Dr. Michael Barnes is our presenter today. And instead of me running through and just reading his bio, I'm going to let him introduce himself in just a second. I do want to say thank you to the Foundry and Dr. Barnes for their continued partnership. If you are interested and want more information, please go to their website. It's forgingnewlives.com. I will include this information in the email for your certificate, as well as how to get a hold of Dr. Barnes if you have any further questions post-webinar. So with that being said, I'm going to zip it and stop my share, let Dr. Barnes take over, and he's going to get kicking.
Thank you, Christy. Christy, I think in the chat, there were a few people that said that they were having a hard time hearing. So I'm not sure if there's anything we can do about that.
It's, yeah, so my volume on my side is good. My volume on my computer is all the way up. So it could be something on your end. I check your volume. I don't know if there's much I can do from here. Hi, everybody. I love to see everybody say hello from the different places. So, yeah, so somebody said she was able to correct it on her end. Teresa got it taken care of. So I think we're good. I'll keep watching for any other issues y'all may be having.
Okay, sounds great. Well, greetings, everyone. Just looking at the chat, it's always nice to see some familiar names. And talking about my really my favorite topic, which is, you know, if you read the description, I always start with, what if we were to really treat addiction like the chronic illness that we say it is? And a few years ago during COVID, I started really looking at that issue and wanting to revamp and create a family program that spoke much more about um, the chronic disease. Like what are they doing in medicine in terms of chronic disease management, and what does the research on families living with other kinds of chronic illnesses, like what are they doing in terms of education and coaching and support and things of that nature? And so the topic that I'm going to talk about, some of you, if you've seen me before, have probably heard this before, or some of it before. And so I'm going to talk about not just our program, because I don't want that to be the, I'll talk some at the end about our program, but I really want to talk about um, a trauma integrated family program that really any program in the country could actually develop if they were inclined to do that. And so often we say to families, this is a chronic progressive family disease, but so often we don't treat it as such. And so to my bio, I will be very brief. I will be having my 41st anniversary in the field of addiction treatment on April 1st. Also, we were just joking about that's my birthday, but I've done everything in the field, to be quite honest. I've been a college professor. I have run psychiatric hospitals, been a clinical director in hospitals, and been an addiction counselor, employee assistance. But my real passion is in the study and understanding of family system trauma. And so looking at systemic or secondary trauma in family systems and how families are impacted, not just by the trauma of the addiction, which I think they clearly are, but also the trauma associated with their own trauma, their own family of origin, transgenerational trauma. So we'll talk a lot about all of those. And so if you have any questions or comments, I love it when people make comments. And if I say something that resonates with your practice or what you all are doing in your agencies, I keep the chat up so I can see that. And I think if others do that too, it's always nice to learn what others are doing or if there are any questions. So I'm going to start by a quote. I wrote a book that I'm editing for publication, and I came up on this statement, and I thought it was really it sets the tone for my model and what I think. And it says, yes, every family is different to a degree. They're different in how they interact with one another. They're different in their ability to connect, their attachment styles. They're different in how they organize, communicate, and deal with emotions and problems. They're different in terms of how much addiction, mental illness, and trauma their current and previous generations have experienced. None of these issues cause addiction, but they do influence how families deal with addiction. While families may be unique, there are certain patterns of coping and identification of solutions that can evolve out of their family of origins orientation or organization. What I call the 5 R's, the rules, roles, rituals, routines, and relationships or boundaries that they grew up with, as well as their family's emotional and relational abilities. Families should not be shamed or blamed. They should be provided an opportunity to learn about addiction, trauma, mental health issues, and transgenerational issues. They should be helped to identify system patterns that are serving to maintain the problem that they're desperately trying to change. And that's the philosophy that our program has been built upon. And anyone who knows me knows that I've been a trauma therapist since 1991. I studied with Charles Figley, who at the time was the leading trauma family system trauma expert in the country. And so I've been looking at, and my research has been on the secondary trauma of parents, of kids who have experienced injuries, life-threatening circumstances, traumas, and requiring intensive care treatment. And that the research I'll talk a little bit about in this process translates beautifully into understanding families dealing with chronic illnesses. And when I was at Cedar at the University of Colorado Health, I did a research study where we kind of surveyed pre and post all the families that came into our family program. And one of the questions that I asked was, is living with an actively using addicted family member traumatizing? And at that time, 74% of the family members strongly agreed and 21% agreed. So 95% of all of the family members were able to talk in this research about the things that happened that they didn't really recognize as traumatizing until a little time to reflect on it. And I always cite the quote in the middle of that slide of a mom who's a mom of a 20-year-old female daughter who was struggling with heroin, and her statement was so specific and it's just powerful that I always read it in these presentations. And she said, it's been really overwhelming. I can sit here calmly and talk now, but that's not the same as when I don't know where my daughter is or what's happening. And I'm getting phone calls from somebody on the street saying that she's been beaten and she's been raped. Really bad things are happening to her. It's not such a calm feeling when you get those phone calls or you get phone calls in the middle of the night. I think there must be some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder for families going through this. And so, there's a danger in being kind of an expert in one area, and that it's like that's all you see. But it's so affirming when I work with families and we begin to talk about the need to have trauma integrated family programming, that how they come in so typically not seeing themselves as traumatized, but after they go through the program, leave the program with the idea of clearly they need their own work. And it's my belief that we need to move family programming outside of the realm of where a family with a loved one who has struggled with addiction to be we're a family in recovery from addiction and trauma, and to move that client out of the identified role and move the family into the role of the actions where the actions take place for healing. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go. And so if you look at the current slide, this is the slide that so often sets the tone for the families that we work with. And when I say that, I mean, it's the slide that helps them with that shift. Not sure what happened to my video. It helps them with the shift from, how many of you have ever had a family member say, well, if my loved one would just get sober, we could go back to normal. And, again, that makes logical sense until the family begins to really look at everything that they've been through. And so when we look at the normal that families want to go back to, in most cases, it's the normal that was there before the addiction, and that they tend to miss the fact that as this individual with a chronic and progressive illness begins to show more and more advanced symptoms of this illness, that they are in essence required to do two things. One is they're not required, but they continue to love their loved one. And the second thing is that they have to learn to live with the addiction while in the process of trying to solve it. And that when families begin to look at Jellick's curve, now again, Jellick's curve is actually kind of making a comeback. And I know it fell out of favor because not everyone goes through the same order of symptoms. But for the family context, it's really useful for them to be able to say, yeah, I remember when he or she started to struggle with, I could tell that they were really guilty about their circumstances, and then increased ability to stop, that they would promise to stop and they just didn't seem to be able to do it. persistent remorse, kind of moving down through here. And when you ask the family, how did you as a family begin to deal with these symptoms that were becoming more and more evident? And as they begin to wrestle with those issues, they begin to recognize how the system began to shift. And usually in what I called the 5 R's earlier, like rules of communicating, keeping secrets, talking behind the person's back, roles, depending on who the person with the primary addiction is, others picking up critical family roles, whether it be parenting, whether it be work and financial support of the family, that those begin to shift. The routines, how, again, depending on the age and the role that the person with primary addiction is wrestling with, that the daily routines begin to change. And that when we're able to work through that process, that the families are generally really much more motivated to change rather than motivated to stay the same. When I was teaching, I was on the faculty at the University of Colorado, and a student asked me, what's it like, what's the best way to work with an unmotivated client? And I said, I wouldn't know, I've never worked with an unmotivated client. And class, laughed. And I said, most of my clients are highly traumatized and they're extremely motivated to stay as safe as possible. And sometimes them staying as safe as possible looks like they're not motivated. And they may not be motivated to make a lot of changes because those changes are so frightening, or they're so different than how they have understood the problem. And in my research with traumatized families, those become key roles, and beginning to look at those 5 R's. So how does chronic disease management, not addiction treatment, but how do they look at family adaptation to a chronic illness? And so John Rowland is a professor at Northwestern. He is a medical family therapist. He is a psychiatrist. He is a phenomenal guy and a phenomenal resource. And he's written several books. And what he said is that if we want to understand how individuals manage or adjust to chronic illness, we have to look at a 5-phased model. Cindy is a Northwestern alum. Congratulations, great school. And when you think of my initial quote, where I talked about how every family is different, but that so much of what they, how they view problems and how they manage problems are based on prior generations. Rowland says that we have to start by looking at a 3-generation assessment, and that this 3-generation assessment will inform what he calls health and illness belief systems or belief schemas, and the idea that what the family members have experienced in prior generations will dictate how they view illness, how they view treatment, how they view asking for help, kind of cultural issues associated with trusting helping society or members of society, and how the family views problems will inform their 5 R's, the rules that they live by, the roles that they play in the family, etc. And that based on how they organize or how they set those roles will dictate how the family kind of works their way through family life cycle stages. And I'll talk about this in the next slide about with addiction. But anytime that individuals aren't able to go through life cycle stages, we begin to see a lot more resentments. We begin to see a lot more conflict. We begin to see long-standing sort of generational conflict within the family. And it's usually associated with control and vigilance on the part of the parents. And that dictates individual development and how each individual in the family will kind of manage their life while still supporting their loved one with the chronic illness. If we look at it from an addiction standpoint, it looks like that. In that it's not just the chronic illness, it's the trauma that's associated with that chronic illness, particularly with addiction. And so we look at individual and family system trauma at the center of this. And when we look at the things that would be tied to that, when we look at all the symptoms of addiction and the conflicts and the negativity, you can begin to see how that is going to impact every aspect of how this family is going to adjust and deal with the chronic illness. And so we've been running our new program for 2 years. And so these are my views of what we're seeing with families who are seeking treatment. And so with our program, about 60% of the families of clients who come to the Foundry actually go into our new family program. The other 30 to 40% are in our old family program. They're still getting family services, but not to the degree that we're offering them to these other families. And we can certainly give them the choice. And what we're finding is that based on a 3-generation assessment, these health illness belief systems and schemas are really the things that influence whether families are going to be willing to ask for help or not. And so they either support or inhibit help seeking and family views of illness and trauma. Yes, John Rowland is very clearly associated with the family systems illness model. Yes, that is actually his model. Yeah. And so this is
The
usually,
question, I'm sorry, Dr. Barnes,
Oh.
the question that was answering was whether John Rowland was associated with motivational interviewing as well.
No, he developed the family systems illness model. Yes, thank you. So this is the first kind of obstacle in getting individuals to embrace the role of family healing. And so we spend a lot of time on educating to help families move past this. Yeah, John Rolnick is with, and it was Rolnick and somebody, can't remember the other guy's name. So as we assess this, it will influence or it will give us a means of intervention to help the families engage in treatment. Bill Miller, yes, thank you. How they view the illness will influence their kind of organization. And that organization either promotes change, growth, and openness, emotionality, or it keeps families stuck in the same place. And so often families that say, well, I don't know why you're asking me to participate, I'm not the one with the problem, are stuck in what we would consider the new normal that evolves as the individual kind of gets more and more advanced in their illness, meaning that the family reorganizes, and you hear people say it all the time, families organize around the problem. And they organize by developing very rigid boundaries. They organize by closing off communication. They organize by being very hypervigilant and very controlling. There are all of these ways that they do that. And so once we have the family engaging in the process, then we're going to be working on helping them understand these organizational issues. And one of the things we talk a lot about is and I don't like the term enabling, and anymore I really see enabling as loving behavior with poor boundaries more than anything. And that when we get into that idea of, well, I've been told that I enable, that we begin to look at enabling really as a trauma response. And I'll show you a slide a little bit later on that. So a lot of what we're going to try to do is help families redo their boundaries. We're going to help them begin to learn how to communicate honestly. We're going to help them learn how to manage their own autonomic nervous system so that they can have these difficult conversations. The family life cycle stages in a chronic, in a family with chronic illness, particularly an illness like addiction, generally tend to get halted in the teenage years. And so when we're working with families, they will often say, I don't know why you want the siblings to be part of this. they really don't have anything to do with it. In fact, they're actually really angry at their loved one for what he's done to the family. And what we found about families with these unresolved life cycle stages is that this is what really influences long-term family relationships, resentments, individual development, etc. And that it is imperative for true family healing that whatever family programming you're doing, that it welcome the naysayer sibling, that it welcomes other family members that maybe have been the lost children in that process and haven't really said much. Because in reality, they're the truth tellers in that family. So the issue that I found with in-person family programming is that given the busy nature of families, that and the fact that they're all over the country, that usually only one person can attend, or maybe two people attend. And we have created a system that is a telehealth model that may have 5 family members from 5 different states participating in the program at the same time. And when I get to the description phase, you'll see it's a multi-phase program. And so we really believe if we're going to manage it like the medical community manages chronic disease, that it needs to include the whole family, not just, I did a study when I was, the same study that I did at Cedar, and we had a really good week-long family program. And when I looked at the ages of who attended, the mean age was 53 years old. And so that who was attending were a lot of mothers and a lot of fathers, and the partners were not able to take a week off of work because they had kids to raise. And so we really wanted to create a program where some of our favorite groups have little crying kids in them. And it really gives that family connection in that process. So when you ask families, and this is a research project that I did several years ago, back in 2005 with Margie Schofield, that we never published, but it was really more in terms of program evaluation. But we asked the families, what were the greatest sources of trauma that they experienced with their loved ones who had issues? I don't know what happened.
Just a little
Christina, am I back?
glitch. We're back.
Okay.
Technology.
I gotta find my screen again. Yeah.
Oh, good.
Uh-huh.
Technology is fabulous when it works.
I'm gonna. Okay.
There we go.
Can you see that?
We can.
Okay. Good. Okay. Interestingly enough, the thing that most families talked about was the shattered dreams that were so associated with their loved one's addiction. And for parents, it was usually shattered dreams about things like college and things like careers, and that are they ever going to get their life together to do those things? For partners, it's the shattered dreams of marriages that are on the rocks, and so there's this significant grief process that I think most family programs talk about, but they don't talk enough about. Because of how often it's talked about by the families. And so other things they talked about, dangerous and out of control behaviors, yelling and threatening, violence, legal involvement, DUIs, police involvement, medical emergencies, overdoses, potential overdoses, suicide attempts, and those kinds of things, loved ones, victimization, psychotic and depressive symptoms. And we're seeing a lot more psychosis with weed, well, not with weed, with high potency THC. But the piece that the families really seem stuck on is the shattered dreams and the grief and loss issues that are just such a part of our programming at this point. Okay. Just for time purposes, I'm going to skip over a couple things. So how do we understand the concept of secondary and systemic trauma? And so as I was studying families that had chronic trauma, I began to put together what I called axioms or testable hypotheses, things that I thought that we needed to really look at in terms of how families manage or survive after major traumatic events. And I think it starts with criterion A of the PTSD diagnosis, and who actually experiences traumatic events. And I always use my son was hit by a car when he was 5, and it's really easy to see him as the primary trauma survivor, and that he was hit by a car, had very life-threatening circumstances, 3 weeks in intensive care, another 3 weeks in the hospital, months in body casts and things like that. So a person who experiences a direct event that involves threat of death, actually threatened injury, physical integrity loss, etc. His mom was standing about 10 yards from him. She wasn't hit by a car, but she witnessed an event that involved death, injury, or threat to physical integrity of another person, and particularly to watch her son be that injured. And so how often are our families witnesses to events and activities that are not only traumatizing to their loved ones, but to themselves? That idea of they're constantly bearing witness to the addiction, to the consequences, to the degradation, to the conflicts. I was at the clinic at Florida State, where I always was as a doc student, and anyone who learns about an unexpected or violent death or serious harm or threat of death or injury experienced by a family member. So it doesn't matter in the family whether you are the primary trauma survivor, whether you were there when the event took place, or that you learned about it. All 3 of the members of our family had significant post-traumatic stress symptoms, and all 3 of us, actually my wife and I, were actually far more debilitated by the trauma than our son was. He recovered pretty quickly, but we found ourselves trying to be really controlling of him and really protective, and to the point where at 7 he was telling us, what do you think I'm going to do? Run out in front of another car? It was an accident. And so we began to realize that we had the potential in our trauma to not only not help him, but to hurt him, hinder his certainly hinder his risk-taking, his life cycle stage achievement, to risk his personal development. And so we had to do a lot of work ourselves in order to allow him to go through the appropriate developmental stages. And it's something that I think, for those of you who do treatment, when we have a young person in treatment who has been using since the age of 11 or 12, 13, and that they have been in and out of treatment, and that they have a failure to thrive kind of mentality, that I always want to assess what was the big trauma that happened in that family system that would have promoted either parenting or rules and roles and routines that kept this person in that role. And so often the young man will look at me like, how do you know something like that? It's like, well, I don't. The other thing I would say about those young people is that they're not going to rehab, they're going to have. And so if I was using at 11, I'm not moving through the developmental stages, the individual or family life cycle stages the way I'm supposed to. So that for those individuals who get sober at 22, 23, they're not starting at the same place that someone who gets sober at 35 is at. And so for a lot of our work with families, they're so frustrated with their loved ones when they get sober. It's like, I had a mom say to me the other day, it's like he's 15. And I said, well, he's developmentally 15. Think of all the things that he could have, should have, would have done and developed in that process. And so a big part of family programming, particularly family programming with a chronic disease, is helping family members, particularly leaders in those families, to recognize that there may be some deficits that aren't necessarily associated with the addiction itself. And so I will often ask families, I want you to pay particularly close attention to the things that you thought were going to go away when your loved one got sober, but that haven't gone away. Decision-making, indecision, self-doubts, and the idea of if you never learned it, it's not like you can rehab it. Rehab indicates that you have those skills. The addiction got in the way, and now we're going to help you start using those skills again. For many of our young people, particularly those who've experienced life-threatening traumas, to where the family's organizing principles have kind of wrapped that person in bubble wrap to some degree, that they're going to have to learn some significantly different. They're going to have to learn all those skills that they didn't learn. So the first thing that we've found in our study was that family members show the exact same symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder that primary trauma survivors do. Fear, anxiety, intrusive thoughts. They're always thinking about their loved one. Did they take their medicine? Did they get to that meeting? Are they going to be okay? We had this.
It's a fun day. It's a good day for technology.
How long was I out?
Just a couple of seconds. It was just a couple of seconds.
Okay, because I thought, how much of that did they hear or not hear? Okay.
Nope, you're
sorry.
here. We wouldn't want it to be boring for anybody,
No.
especially our presenters. We want to keep you on your toes.
Technology I've had my days.
Well,
So
I
the
agree
idea
with
that
them.
when we're thinking about family programming, particularly family programming with a chronic illness, it is important to recognize that the family members may have the same element of control and hypervigilance, intrusive thoughts, self-doubt, all the same symptoms that we would see in DSM-5 for the client, that we would see as the primary trauma survivor, and that we have to educate them on those. So I did a study where I asked family members if someone were to call them, knowing their circumstances and knowing their loved one, and the issues that they've had with their loved one, and want to know, like, what is life like? I asked them to write it as much down as they could think to write. And I had 40 hours of interviews, and I had lots and lots of data. And when I coded
Let's see if he comes back. Sorry, y'all. Thank you for your patience. They are having some rough weather in Colorado.
Well, yeah, I'm sorry. I haven't noticed anything here, but
It happens. It's all good.
yeah, thanks for your patience, everyone. This is what, when I coded all of that data, and that there were very clearly common emotional responses and cognitive responses and physical responses, common behavioral responses, and then common defenses. And what's really interesting is Annie Camacho, who is our family director, and I talk about this all the time, that there is really a parallel process in the healing of family members and their loved ones. And if you look at that list, out of the equation, wouldn't that also fit for the vast majority of our clients? And so this needs support, and they need all the support they can get. It's the hardest thing they'll ever do. But the idea that they all need coaching and education that can help them to begin to recognize this. And I've shown this to hundreds, if not thousands of families and family members. And I've never had anyone say, wow, that must be really hard because I don't have any of that. The vast majority talk about that. And so I'm happy to send this PowerPoint to anyone. Let's try this one more time.
It's Wednesday. We'll go with it's Wednesday.
Okay. And so, as I was saying, I'm happy to share these slides. I'm happy for you to use this with families, let them look at this and see if it fits. And if you look at the bottom of this slide, when you put the pieces together, it really is about anxiety and worry and hypervigilance and control. And it's really a traumatic stress response that is trying to keep the wheels on the bus moving and together. So this is the first thing, post-traumatic stress symptoms. The second thing that we found was that the longer the family stays in a fight or flight response, that they begin to shift away from their worldview and the things that are important to them, like school and religion and work and other things, careers, and begin to focus much more on personal vulnerability, safety, and control. And this idea that Ronnie Janoff Bowman wrote a really good book in 1985 called Shattered Assumptions. And she says that when we look at those belief systems about illness and belief systems about trauma and events in people's lives, that if we were to look at them as random or as that the world is really dangerous, that it would impede our ability to function. And so often that what the trauma does is bring to light the fear and bring to light that the world is not safe and benevolent, that it's really vulnerable. And the world isn't meaning, it's kind of random that, no matter what we do, you never know what's going to happen next. And when I started putting the pieces of that together, I started looking at the helicopter parents, or looking at those parents that have worked so hard to keep someone they love so much alive and trying to protect them from the consequences of the illness. So I've always said that telling family members to stop enabling is like Nancy Reagan telling an addict to just say no, it's really shaming. And so the idea of, I believe we need to reframe things like enabling to really being loving behaviors, and that we do it. When I ask people who have admitted that they have a history of doing this, that at the thought of saying no to their loved one about their rent, and they know that their loved one's going to be angry, and they can feel their own chest tighten, and their breathing gets faster, and they can begin to really experience that fight or flight response as they think about not enabling, or as they think about not doing that. And so helping families to learn how to resource and how to manage their own autonomic nervous system is absolutely critical. Helping people, the other thing we found was that perception was way more important than reality. How they understand addiction, how they understand trauma, how they understand partnered relationships are going to be based on what we had talked about earlier about those health and illness schemas and the family experiences. And many years ago, Sean Holiday had a quote that I just think fits. And it says, the crisis is not the problem. It's the family's constraining beliefs that restrict alternative views about the crisis that become the problem. And as therapists, we tend to focus on helping families by giving them more resources. And so often maybe some of you have experienced where you've worked hard to get them a referral somewhere, or you've recommended that they do certain things and they don't do them. And what I've found from our work with families is they don't do them because so often the resources that we offer aren't consistent with their understanding of the problem. And so we have to begin to match where the client is, where the family is, with resources that will help them get to the point where they can see the need to enter their own level of care, their own level of healing. And then the last thing that we found in our study was a thing that I called, or I termed, systemic traumatic stress, not secondary traumatic stress, which is as a loving parent, the trauma that I experienced by watching my son be traumatized. That's vicarious trauma. But systemic trauma is as all of the family members are beginning to try to manage what's going to happen now that our loved one has this chronic disease, that the individual responses to the various crises and stressors begin to create shifts in new rules and roles and routines. Relationships, boundaries begin to change. And what we found from a boundary issue is that the external boundary around the family generally begins to close. And it closes as a way of buying the family some time to figure out what they're going to do. But it also prevents new information from coming in from the outside that will confuse the family and confuse family members. And so it's a way for families to be, or for the leaders of families to be able to maintain some semblance of control while they try to solve the crisis that's happening. At the same time, internal boundaries become more diffuse, which means that parents are more involved in the kids, the kids subsystem, and kids are parentified and brought up to take on the role of mom while dad's in treatment and mom is busy taking care of work-related issues. And we begin to see enmeshment happening at that point. So it is the systemic traumatic stress, and we could do a whole hour on that with no trouble whatsoever, that tends to create conflict and anger, resentment, emotional distancing, not just about the addiction, but about how it's being handled. And we have really just about 10 minutes. So I want to talk a little bit in that last 10 minutes. So this is a quote also from my book that speaks to the development of the program. And I wrote, as far as the newer normal is concerned, like any other area of your life that you have a desire to change, learning more about it is the prerequisite for action. New insights stimulate new solutions. New solutions allow for new actions. New actions allow for different relationships. Different relationships promote family healing. Thus, we're talking about the creation of new insights, solutions, and relationships. And that's really what I was thinking about when I created the program. And Annie and I, Annie really runs the program, has embraced that completely. And so what we have is a two-phase family program. The first, creatively called phase 1, or Family 101, includes weekly video. I have videos that the families watch that I have done. We every Wednesday have a multi-family support group that people can come back forever. And we have some families that have their loved one being sober for 2 years that are coming back, and others where after a year and a half, their loved one has relapsed and they've come back into the support group. And, you know, just like AA and the fellowship of that process, and in Al-Anon, families need that process as well. So they watch a video, they attend a support group, they have a weekly, if their loved one is in treatment at the Foundry, they have a weekly session with their loved one. And they're really not family therapy sessions, but sessions to help everyone learn how to talk to one another, and for each to share with the other what they're learning. And it's very powerful for family members to say, you know, we're wrestling with powerlessness just like you are. And why you're so mad at me, because I'm always trying to be, telling you what to do. Every Sunday, they have another group, 90-minute group, in which Annie and I will talk about the video and debrief the video. What did they learn? I can clarify questions and concerns. I can advance the education a little bit when they have certain questions and teach them a little bit more. The other thing that's in phase one is each week they do a different assessment. If I have a little bit of time, I'll show you some of the outcomes for that assessment. And it's a it's a 6-week program. The first week is actually an introduction, but the content for week A is addiction as a chronic disease. Week B is trauma 101. Week C is the impact of addiction and trauma on family functioning, really looking at the 5 R's. Week D, keys for family healing, moving from normal to a newer normal. And then E is family trauma, boundaries, enabling, and other protective behaviors, and where we're really kind of looking at the change process. Given the fact that it's telehealth, we have people from all over the country participating. And we have recently, when I was really writing the program, I was thinking about interventionists, to be honest, and I was thinking how many families would benefit from getting this kind of information and support from other families as they're trying to get their loved one in treatment. So we're opening we have opened the program up to families that their loved one is still using. And we are of this systemic, systems theory belief that a change in one or more members of a family system have incredible power to influence the behaviors of others. And we're already seeing that to be the case, where people are coming into treatment that maybe wouldn't have come into treatment. The other thing we're seeing is that when people do relapse, they tend to be much shorter relapses because the family is able to talk about it on a different level. Once the families have completed Trauma 101 or Family 101, then we have another program that is phase 2 or Family 102, that is a 12-week family coaching process where in phase 1, it's multifamily group. In phase 2, it's working with each family independently. And when I talk about, we work on the 5-generation assessment, we work on assessing the 5 R's or family organization. We take a look at family life cycle stages, and we work with them on the creation of a new healing story. And so once they have kind of gone through all of this programming, that they answer 5 questions. What happened? Why did it happen? Why did it happen to us? Why did we react the way we did when it happened? And what will we do in the future if anything similar were to happen? And each person writes and answers each of those questions independently. And then we have them come together to talk about each of those answers and come up with, there is no perfect answer. So the family begins to work together to answer those questions. And they kind of leave phase 2 with a story that says, why we did it was because of our history, because we loved each other, because we were terrified, and all of those things. So we're in the process of developing a 103, which is a program for couples who were in the program. And, so often they continue to struggle in their relationships. So looking at more couples kinds of coaching programming. And then we're also hoping to do some summer retreats for families and for couples. So I said I would show you, this is just one questionnaire. This was 158 family members, and this was their family coping. It's a questionnaire that was developed in Birmingham, England, and I was communicating with that research team about the use of it and looking at things like pretending all is well when it really wasn't, just avoiding the problem. 60% did that sometime or 30% often. Got on with my own things and acted as if he or she wasn't there. Avoidance, which is a classic trauma-related symptom. Again, 39% did that sometimes and 17 often. So we're collecting data. We have data on family coping, on family member symptoms, on the symptoms that they recognize in their clients. We've continued the questionnaire on what would you tell people that life is like with an actively using person. So we're really trying to show improved outcomes in that way. So in all of our technology issues, I seem to have lost you all. So if I know we're right at, we have 3 minutes.
Yeah, we're here. We're here. So everybody will, thank you so much, Dr. Barnes. That was actually really good. I know the technology was a little irritating, but everybody was so grateful and had such great messages for you, and are very interested in you coming back for a systemic trauma based webinar.
Oh, that would be great.
If that interests you, I would love to have you back, and I know everybody else would. So everybody, thank you so much for coming. Stay tuned in the next couple of weeks for information on our March webinar. We'll see if when those details come out, keep an eye out. Dr. Barnes, everybody has asked for your slide deck. I believe you did mention that you would provide that.
Absolutely happy to do that. So Amber, would you jump on, turn your mic on and give them your contact information so that they can actually get the slides?
Well, if you would like, we can do this one of two ways. We can do that, or you can send them to me and I'll include it in with their certificate. Because I'm not kidding, I probably had 40 people. I want the slide deck, I want the slide deck. I don't know how interested in emails Amber is. So
I'm fine with whatever's easier for everybody else. So and I saw Alita had a couple questions as well on the cost for family 1 and family 2. And yes, Alita, the family program is fully virtual.
There you go.
Did you want me to discuss cost for family 101 or 102, or they could reach out to us for more details, whatever is easier for everybody?
There she is.
I mean, that's up to Christy, but I would think it's a pretty quick discussion. If you
go right ahead.
All right. Well, our family 101 program is 5 weeks and it's $500 for the 5 weeks. And then 102 is 12 weeks and it's $1,200 for the 12 weeks. So you're really looking at an average of $100 a week for Michael Barnes Family Institute virtual family coaching program.
Awesome. That's amazing.
Okay, well, thank you everyone for attending.
Yeah.
And yeah.
If you have any questions,
anytime.
Right on. Well, we'll be reaching out to you very soon, Dr. Barnes, because the amount of interest that we have in that, I'm very interested in myself and would love to partner with y'all again. I'll send out any additional information that I have with the certificates. Again, Friday will be the day. You'll see those pop in. Always check your junk email. I like the junk file. That's where my emails go. And if you have any additional questions, please reach out to me. Happy to help. And Dr. Barnes, thank you so much for your time. I apologize for any technology glitches, but such quality information, worth every minute.
I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us, Christy.
Yeah, thanks.
You bet. You guys have a nice day. See you next month.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Yeah.